In this video, we're going to take a look at how to create magazines. Consider magazines as basically one giant box in which a particular unit can pull items out of. The items that are inside the magazines need to match the items that are actually going to be used by a particular vessel or a particular aircraft or anything along those lines. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and keep things nice and simple. I'm just simply going to click on the magazines button. We've already experimented a little while ago with using a Kilo 2 where we've added a couple different weapon records to it. Keep in mind, a common thing that people will do is they'll design it so the weapon record itself has less than the maximum quality of that particular item. So when you add it onto here, you can actually make a fairly good sized magazine. So what we're going to go ahead is we're going to go create a magazine customized just for the purposes of our small tank. We're just going to visualize riding around with a little trailer that can quickly load things back into the tank. This is, of course, to be very logistically difficult, but it works pretty well for our example. So I'm going to go to add-ins, command, I'm going to go ahead and copy the entry. We're going to go ahead and call this T72M magazine trailer. Magazine trailer. Because it's the only way I can make it make sense. So we'll go ahead and call this T72M magazine trailer. And of course, we can define anything such as how much armor the magazine has, its rate of fire, which is basically how quickly and how big of a magazine it is. So in this case, we're going to keep our magazine a pretty straightforward multiple of 37. We'll do 74. It's a pretty big trailer. And we're simply going to say 74 just like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make our way down here. We're going to get rid of all these torpedoes and everything because it simply doesn't make any sense. And we're simply going to take that weapon that we had a little bit earlier, and we're just going to load it in directly. So 125 millimeter. And we're simply going to grab our example weapon here. Now notice we have one magazine that holds 37 out of 37. Now because of this, our capacity is double what we're actually carrying on board. So one of the common things we actually can do is we can come in here and we can actually duplicate this and make it a special magazine. So I'll go ahead and say this one, example magazine. And I will double the capability for how much it can hold. Ooh. Go ahead and I'll move myself away. Oh, sorry about that. I forgot to actually make sure the weapon actually makes sense. This is going to be the example. This isn't necessarily going to be my load. In this case, I'm now going to come over here and say our new default load is going to be 37 times 2, which is going to be 74. And now we have an extra one. We can't rename this, unfortunately, so it gets a little bit difficult to identify. So go ahead and close this one out. That's going to be at 9520. I'll come down here and change this one to 9520 and press enter. Go ahead and close my magazine out real quick. Go back to my magazine. And now I can see I have a brand new magazine, which has a capacity of 74. And by default, it holds us a bunch of 74 armor-piercing rounds with this rate of fire, giving us the ability to quickly load it back onto the actual, in our case, tank that we're going to be using. So now that we have our magazine, we'll go ahead and close it up. And we're going to go over to our actual weapon mount here itself. And we actually have the ability to add the magazine either to the unit or to the weapon. So in this case, if I wanted to make my turret part of that trailer, I could actually come in here now and I could type in 125 millimeter. And I can now take the example magazine that we have that we created just a while ago. Now note there are two here because remember it's going off weapon records. The second one here is going to be the one that's going to act as our magazine. So now that we've created that, we have a separate magazine from the weapon itself that it can draw ammunition directly into. You know, it's worth noting as well that when you start messing with this particular feature, you're going to run into a situation where you're going to have to mess with the magazine's rate of fire so that it agrees with what you have here. In this case, my magazine's rate of fire is 5, so we need to make sure both of those values agree with each other. Now, if we wanted to make a magazine just for this weapon, separate from its normal mount capacity, we could actually dial that value in here. But in our particular case, we've actually added it directly to the mount. Now, if we wanted to add this to the vehicle itself, we'd have to create the tank, and then when you see the actual magazine records, we'd put this magazine into that tank as opposed to into this mount. So in this particular case, we would definitely probably not have this here, only on account of the fact, like I said, that's going to make things a little bit more complicated. Now, with all magazines, you give the ability to go ahead and create some what they call generic magazines as well, which is simply going to be a magazine that holds things that allows the user to stick them in directly inside of the mission editor itself. So for example, if I were to quickly filter my data, we'll say generic. You'll notice there's a wide variety of generic mounts here. In each one of these generic mounts, of course, we could go through and we could add our own private magazines to them as well, should we need to do so. So in this case, I'll go ahead and close my mount out. We'll go back to magazines. We'll go ahead and select our different magazine options here. Again, we'll go back up to add-ins, filter, text filters, contains. We'll type in generic here. And you'll notice now we have these generic magazines that we can just stuff full of all sorts of good stuff here. There are even things such as carrier magazines. So if I quickly unfilter all this data here, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick little filter to show it to you as well. Text filters, contains, carrier. Ooh, so this particular one, hold on. In this case, you can see that all the items in this particular magazine are completely isolated from the actual ship. None of these items will actually be fired from the ship. They will simply be loaded onto the different types of aircraft and units that the ship can actually deploy. So that is it as far as creating your own magazines goes. The most critical things here are to double check your rate of fire as well as capacity. These numbers have to be compatible with each other. Otherwise, you're going to have issues and you're going to get validation errors.